Back now on Race for the White House. What do today's disastrous events mean for your economic future? Joining me now is Obama supporter Robert Reich, who was Secretary of the Labor under President Clinton. And Mr. Reich is a professor of public policy at the University of California, Berkeley, and the author of Supercapitalism, the Transformation of Business, Democracy, and Everyday Life. Secretary Reich, welcome.
Thank you, David. David, this is not economic Armageddon. Maybe those are the most reassuring words I can give you.
What does it mean then today?
Well, it means that consumers are likely to have a harder time getting credit if there is no bailout package. And by the way, I think there will be a bailout package. But if there is no bailout package, consumers will have a harder time getting credit in the future, borrowing money. And businesses may have a harder time borrowing money. And that will slow the economy down even further. But look, at either way, the sad news, the unfortunate news, David, is that we are probably going to be in a deep recession next year, bailout or no bailout.
And just a function of what we've been going through the past year and a half?
No,
and beyond?
It really goes deeper than that. When housing prices started to drop about a year and a half, 2 years ago, a lot of consumers no longer had the piggy bank that they used to have in terms of refinancing their homes or getting home equity loans. You know, that really was a source of keeping the economy going because wages weren't going up, incomes were not going up. Most consumers actually, if you look at family income, are worse off today than they were 7 or 8 years ago. But as long as they could borrow against their homes, they were doing fine. When that ended, when those piggy banks closed, when housing prices started to go down, that's when things started to really slow down. So regardless of what happens to Wall Street, Main Street is in trouble.
Right. And the question is this really the answer? This is a complicated bill to understand, made more complicated by some of the oversight and other provisions that are now included in this bill. But basically, it's a big fat loan to troubled investment banks with the idea of opening up the credit markets. Is this the way to do it?
Well, something big had to be done. I think this is more psychological, or maybe you could say psychotherapy for credit markets, for global capital markets, than it is anything else. Something big had to be done. Treasury Secretary and Ben Bernanke, the chair of the Fed, thought something big represented $700 billion to $1 trillion. It would be loans, and it would also be equity, direct investments in those companies to some extent. But look, the public thinks this is a stupid idea. I mean, I've been talking to members of Congress all day, and they've said that email and letters and phone calls have been running 20 or 30 to 1 against this. And so it's not surprising that members of Congress, particularly majority of the House, which is all of them are up for re-election in just 5 weeks, they said no.
Well, okay, but let's talk about leadership, Secretary Reich. I mean, here you've got a president who is very unpopular and is not in a very good position to have this plan sold on Capitol Hill. And he's got a Treasury Secretary who, by most accounts, has not made the sale either. So here are two presidential candidates who had the nation's attention, tens of millions of people watching on Friday night. Did they come up short in laying out both the stakes and the prescription for how we get out of this?
Well, neither one of them, Barack Obama nor John McCain, wanted to get in front of Congress because after this is Congress's responsibility. This is the administration's albatross. This happened on George Bush's watch. And I think neither candidate wanted to intrude politics and the presidential politics on this process. Now the process is blown up. I mean, John McCain, I'm afraid, has some explaining to do because, remember, he suspended his campaign, went down, called that meeting, made sure that Obama was at that meeting with the president. And the House Republicans that he represented are the ones who did not vote for this particular measure today.
Well, but let's remember, Secretary Reich, that there were 95 Democrats who didn't vote for this either. And maybe the hands-off approach by Senator Obama caused some of them to feel like they had some cover.
You know, David, the problem is that you could never get the Democrats alone to take responsibility for this wildly unpopular bill. They had to have Republican support. And Nancy Pelosi made absolutely clear to John Boehner that she was not going to put the Democrats in the position of supporting this incredibly unpopular bill unless a majority of Republicans went along. So you had to have both parties together, and that did not happen.
What do you worry about?
Well, I'm worried right now that there will be no bailout bill and world confidence in the dollar, world confidence in American financial markets will plummet. And as a result, the dollar will drop. As a result, everything we buy from abroad will cost more. And the entire financial system will kind of grind, not to a halt. It's not going to halt, but it'll get slower and slower and slower. Again, this is not economic Armageddon. This is not the end of the world. I think that if a bill passes in some sort, some fashion over the next week, it'll be fine. Even if it's $150 billion, the first installment, that's okay.
All right, a good way to end. Secretary Robert Reich, thanks very much for coming on tonight.
Thanks, David.